the importance of your Yin Yang balance. We are Shaltazar, the Gavish Baninu, the energy of 33, the Master Teacher, and we have come forth at this time to bring you divine wisdom. And so it is, life, ever expanding. But is that actually the truth? Although life appears to always be expanding, that may not be the case. As we have told you before, life is circular. Within the cycles of life are expansion, but also contraction. So how does this help you? What good is this knowledge that life grows by expanding and contracting? The more you understand life, the easier your journey through it can be. Because we know all, it makes total sense to us. But in the human form, you are missing so many pieces of the puzzle. And we realize your mind always has a strong desire to know the answers. But the knowing we are referring to is different. It is what you may refer to as the knowing of the heart. Not when your mind tells you it is right, but when something deep inside of you just knows. We can assure you that within your DNA is this knowing of how life operates. But when you are unable to connect to this DNA knowing, you are traveling through life without a rudder. Oh, the mind thinks it knows, but let us assure you that is not the case. So what can we do about that, you ask? And we would say, let go of the mind. But what does that mean? To allow the mind to be still, to be quiet. The mind may go on thinking, but you have dropped your attachment to your mind. Take a deep breath. Feel the moment. Connect with your senses. And in that moment that you are truly feeling, the mind will appear to be still. It is not, but your attention is on the sensory, and it is difficult to have your attention on two things at once. So to drop the mind, simply shift to your senses. It takes discipline because the mind is uncomfortable not being the center of attention. It has not always been that way in your human journey. When you first incarnated into human life as a baby, your mind was very small. It was incapable of being in charge. It was only as the mind matured that you were taught that it is more important to think than to feel. It was not always that way in your world. There were civilizations that became very advanced, that were here before you. We have spoken about them in past teachings, Lemuria and Atlantis. Have you ever wondered how they could have been so advanced without the technology you have today? It was because their wisdom, their knowing, came from that other consciousness we referred to. The inner knowing that was in their DNA. They knew of the stars, the planets, and the solar systems without the help of high-powered telescopes. They knew much because they connected to the wisdom within. How did they do that, you ask? They were able to do so because they allowed their senses to become highly developed. They felt more and thought less. Their minds were not as developed as modern-day humans. And as an aside, as many of you suspect, the full potential of the human brain has not yet been reached. Your brain, your mind, can do so much more. You are not using it to the full potential it was designed for. You don't need what you call computers to do all your advanced thinking. If you allowed your brain to develop more fully, it could be as powerful as the most cutting-edge computers on your planet. But back to the ancient civilizations known as Lemuria and Atlantis. As we have just told you, they became highly advanced by learning to connect to their DNA wisdom. And let us tell you, they were very good at it. They could easily quiet their minds and open widely their sensory connections. From that connection, they could very strongly access what many of you would refer to as the sixth sense, or intuition. Yes, they were masters at connecting to the universal mind field. All that was, all that is, and all that will ever be. But you see, from this inner knowing, what some refer to as the yin, the feminine energy of the knowing, in order to create the mind, what some refer to as the yang, the masculine doing, must be called upon. So with a highly evolved yin, a great ability to connect to the inner knowing, these ancient, advanced civilizations moved to develop their minds, their brains. And as we mentioned prior, the Source created the human brain with great potential. What happened then refers back to the beginning of this teaching about expansion and contraction. As the ancient evolved ones began to develop their ability to think in a very progressed way, they somehow forgot about the true knowing, the inner wisdom, and how they connected to it. They allowed their thinking minds to take over. They allowed their brains to be in charge more of the time. They spent less time in their sensory consciousness and more in their thinking consciousness. The more they began to expand the capacity of their brains, the less they relied upon their DNA wisdom. As their minds developed, they began to bicker, to disagree, to argue, for the way of the mind is much different than the way of the heart. Feelings don't argue. They don't bicker. They don't disagree. Feelings have no desire to be right. But the mind does. As these civilizations relied more on their brains than their intuition, much strife came about. As we have told you before, although Lemuria and Atlantis bore similarities, these two civilizations occurred at very different times in history. Needless to say, many of you know that these two highly evolved civilizations ceased to exist. They disappeared into extinction. We are not saying that the only reason they disappeared is because they allowed their minds to evolve and stop being as sensory as they once were. But let us assure you, it was a major contributing factor. It is interesting to note in a microcosm that the human form comes into existence with a great capacity to feel and not much of a developed brain. As time goes on in the human maturation process, the mind develops more and more. This is very similar to how Atlantis and Lemuria evolved as well. And so here we are back to your civilization. Let us tie up the loose ends of this teaching. Let us reiterate what we have taught you before, that all creation occurs from both the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang. Even the Source creates that way. It has always been and always will be that the sensory and the thinking, the feeling and the doing, that yin and the yang allows creation to come forth into existence. You cannot create without the masculine and feminine working together. Both are required for creation to come into existence. What then is the essence of this teaching? In one word, balance. The destruction of the civilizations we have referred to came forth because, in simple terms, their feeling and thinking became out of balance. Remember how we told you that the human brain had so much unused potential? If any civilization chooses to focus on developing the brain potential without allowing the feeling consciousness to expand as well, then the risks of destruction are high. So, our brothers and sisters, you are at an important crossroads in the evolution of your civilization. Unless you can get your feeling and your thinking back into balance, the risks of following what happened to Lemuria, and Atlantis are somewhat high. The choice is yours, the collective consciousness. Do you want to follow the ways of past civilizations? Do you want this to be the time of contraction on your planet? Or would you like to see the cycle of expansion continue? If you want your planet to continue to evolve, you must bring back into balance the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, the feeling consciousness and the thinking consciousness. Once again, the choice is yours. Start with yourself. Look deep within and get a sense of your yin-yang equilibrium. If it is out of balance, use your awareness to bring it back. Work on ensuring that you practice feeling as well as thinking. Share this message with others. If you want your world to continue to expand, then it's time to feel more and think less. We bring you this message from a place of love. We are here with you now and forever.